So let's talk today about what I like to call slips and your difficult or narcissistic parent. I wanted to talk about something that outs my own imperfection, maybe that helps you feel a little more self-compassionate, and also that is a little more personal and nuanced, because I think it's something we can all relate to. And the reason I've started to call it slips is because obviously we've talked in other episodes about the importance of being realistic with your expectations. Like, don't go to the hardware store for milk. There's that famous quote, and whenever I hear that, I roll my eyes. But yet, of course, inevitably, there are moments where sometimes I might go to my parents or family members that I know are difficult or narcissistic to get the milk from the hardware store. And one example is I have a big birthday sort of coming up, like a decade type birthday. And so I think that I was feeling a little bit of that longing to have togetherness. So I invited a family member that I probably wouldn't normally have invited, because I think I was just hoping for a fresh start moment, or maybe that they'd change. So again, I'm just telling you the honest truth that even for me, that sometimes I have these moments where I'm not really remembering exactly what I can expect from them. And I actually don't think I did anything wrong. And that's what I want to talk about is, once in a while, it can't hurt every few years, if it feels right to you, to throw out an olive branch, even if it's just to prove to yourself that they still are who they've always been. And that sort of is how I went for me. This person made some excuses, said they couldn't make it, even though they really, for whatever reason, for me, and I could be wrong, felt very much like excuses. And it was really hurtful, because I think that I thought that they would prioritize me more. And I think that's something that for all of us that have had narcissistic or difficult parents, that sometimes we've felt important to them, but then sometimes when we fall out of their favor, or we don't feel useful for them, we kind of feel thrown away by them. And it's a really painful emotion, because I think it brings up that feeling of like, do we matter? And I think like that is a really, really hard emotion to get to. So I think how I worked on it was, I first of all acknowledged that maybe it wouldn't have been a good thing that they came. Like, they were already starting to complain, and it seemed like it wasn't what they wanted to do anyway. So their saying they couldn't come in a way was maybe protecting me from something that would have been difficult, because clearly we weren't really going to reconnect if they were already complaining when I was inviting them to a big birthday, which I felt like was kind of a nice, inclusive thing for me to do. The other thing was like, again, just mourning that little moment of like, they still are who they've always been. And so if you're in that with a family member where you hoped maybe after years they changed, and then you open the door to them and then something like that happened, I think that's okay to feel, right? Which is like this re-grieving process of realizing they still are difficult and that you really can't expect more from them. So that's a hard one, right? Especially when, as we get older, a lot of times we have less family members to choose from. Maybe some people have passed away. I know in my life, like my grandparents, who I was very close to, have both passed away. So they're not an option. And so it leaves me with kind of a smaller pool of family members. And then the other thing is I made like another plan, though. This is a pro thing I did, meaning like not I'm a pro, but this was a positive thing I did, is I planned a few different celebrations with some other family members that they did plan ahead. They are prioritizing me, and that feels really good. And even yesterday I went out to dinner with a friend and her significant other, and they treated me so nicely, like really valued my friendship, and that felt so good. And I thought to myself, I'm like, okay, this is what I tell people to do, which is, even though they're not my biological relatives, they really felt like they did the things that a biological relatives would do. They were really like, where do you want to go out to eat? What would you like to do? This is your night. And kind of that really warmed my heart. And again, we're not saying that it has to be all about me. That's not my point. But just, I think it brings up the idea that if you've had a narcissistic or difficult parent, even when you're doing things that maybe feel like it's for you, there's that little undercurrent of like, but you're modifying it slightly to make it what they want. And so I think it's nice to have those moments of freedom with that. Another thing that comes to mind that I think I'm not sure is a slip or not is kind of like accepting something like a gift kind of a thing from someone that you've had a difficult relationship with. I think this is a hard one, right? And I think that I go back and forth on accepting anything from a family member where there's any sort of dysfunction, and I don't know what the right answer is. That's why I want to talk to you about this, because I just don't think there's a right or wrong. I think it depends on where you're at. I think if they want to give you something, help you in some way, that if you think that it's going to set up a pattern of abuse, don't do it. And I think there's been times where I definitely needed to break that cycle with family members, but I also think that sometimes I think that, well, if they truly want to like give a gift in some sort of way, then I don't know. Part of me is just like, let me accept it, because they're going to be difficult either way. I think I've talked about that in other episodes where they're going to be difficult either way. If they want to, give me a gift card to go out to dinner, I might as well take the gift card, because they're going to be difficult either way. And I know that's not everyone's story with their difficult parents. Maybe for you it's something different, like they want to help you take care of your child, and maybe that's your dilemma, right? Of like, do you want to accept that, or do you want to like still try to take your kid to childcare? And will that get murky with the relationship? And what's the right answer with that? So that's another example of how it could look. And again, similarly, I'm not sure there's a clear right answer. I think that part of dealing with personality disordered people is their sense of self is a little bit malleable, right? The them that you sit with and interact with one day could look different than another day. And of course, everyone has moods and difficult days, but with narcissistic or borderline people, it's almost like all of a sudden they can flip on their own values, and that can be really confusing. So again, I think now I try to name to myself that maybe I had a little slip. And then I think it makes me chuckle, because it almost feels like I had a drink after being sober. And it kind of pauses the pattern and helps me identify what happened. And then I try to, over time, realize, was that okay for the time, or is that something I need to not do again? But I try to really treat it lightly with compassion. And I think that is the main theme I want to kind of impart to you, is this isn't to be perfectionistic, because even though I'm using the word slip, it's more because if we think about a recovery process, right? If you're trying to get sober, that slips are a part of recovery. They always say that. So I think that the same is applicable with our relationship with our difficult parent. So I hope that helps. Thank you.